This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. We are going to wrap up the John Walsh connections and the death of his son, Adam Walsh, today. We have with us Lindsay McBrayer.
Hey.
Good morning. And Harriet Suchet.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. I'm hoping to actually blast through many slides today, finalizing these connections that we've been talking about and quickly or briefly covering what we've been discussing over the last 3 or so weeks. So I'm going to climb right back into it because there was some information in Lindsay's PowerPoint presentation that I found extremely interesting. And I'm going to start with that, and then we'll climb right back into John Walsh. This takes us all the way back to the Oakland County child killings, which I know, Lindsay, you have indicated that you thought there was a match or a connection between this particular set of unsolved murders and what we've been looking at with John Walsh, correct?
Just with the island concept, yeah.
The Fox Island, which was the...
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so I know that putting that into play, I found some interesting stuff, which was an article that you had in there, and it says that this above quotations are... first off, I want to say that I now have Chris Bush's father's partial name, H. Lee Bush. Is that the Bush that you found, Harriet, when you were doing your solves?
Yep, Harold Lee Bush.
That's him.
Harold.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Now I can put a first name to that. So evidently he was an executive financial director in Europe and the U.S. They did an interview, or the FBI interviewed Chris Bush's older brother back in 2008. He says, here's a little more background on our gregarious chef and friend to all. And then in quotes, all those over 18 and able to physically defend themselves, Chris Bush. So Chris Bush was born on 7/31/51, the youngest of 4 boys to Elsie and H. Lee Bush. The family moved frequently when the kids were young because the father was an executive with General Motors for 40 years. In fact, he was an executive financial director in Europe and the United States for GM. Yep. 3 of the 4 sons predeceased the parents, who lived until their early 90s. One son, described as a homosexual and kind of an activist, died of leukemia in England, where he had lived for several years. Another son died approximately 10 years ago in Michigan of congestive heart failure and diabetes, and had struggled with alcoholism. Chris committed suicide, and they have in quotes, on November 22nd of 1978, was the first of the sons to die. He was cremated 2 days later at a funeral home in Birmingham, 2 short blocks from my parents' home. And I'm not sure who's actually writing this, but they said there was a small death notice for Bush, but they could find no obituary for him. So that I found was interesting.
Can I say something really quick?
Yep.
There is no record of a suicide at the police department.
Correct.
And to come up with is that he kind of was, that it was faked for various reasons. They wanted to get the Nazi people that were, it's a big mess. But there's no record.
Yeah.
So you think he was basically, that was just a setup to make it look like he went away and then was, moved to some other location and lived out his life?
No, he just stayed there.
Well, my theory on it is that they've used him. So they killed him off. That's how I pretend like it's a movie. They killed him off, but secretly he's not really dead because they still need him to commit these other crimes and pin these crimes on other people.
Huh.
So
that's an interesting theory.
Aspect. That would be the perfect way to pin it on other people and for them never to blame it on Chris Bush because, oh, he's dead. He can't have done it.
Well, and evidently he was hemmed up for a few things, but never actually suffered any charges. I guess his father was able to buy his way out of pretty much every bit of trouble that he had ever been in.
Yep.
Well, this goes on to say that
after the Nazis. They were going after all the Nazis that had came through here, and so I think that he was used for that. And yes, there were murders under that. Jack committed, and he feels bad. Yeah, so let's move on.
There's a little bit more information on him that, again, I thought was interesting. So it says Bush then attended Wayne State University in Detroit for 1 year. He later went to a culinary institute in Midland, Michigan. His father provided the financial backing to open a bar restaurant called the Scotsman in Alma, Michigan. While Chris Bush was running the Scotsman, he was living in a rental home at 736 North State Street, Alma, Michigan. At some point after Bush was arrested for CSC with a minor at the Scotsman in January of 1977, he moved home to his parents' house in Bloomfield, Michigan. Now, I feel like Bloomfield came up somewhere.
It did, and I was just thinking the same thing. And as soon as you said it, it left my brain.
I feel like that came up in a message, but I'm not sure which.
Yes, it did. It has to do with Hoffa and his people.
Oh.
I mean, it's a big mess. And then you got General Motors. I mean, we can go on and on. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm going to get to with the General Motors, because it says the Bushes lived in Bloomfield Village home from 1970 to July of 1979. Bush was employed as an administrative chef at an assisted living retirement complex called the Franklin Club Apartments. Now, does this go back? What were you saying about Franklin?
It just made me think about the Franklin case and that type of thing, how they just use these names like so frequently, like
for different types of,
I guess for you know how it's kind of like the same kind of, I feel like it's the same kind of aspect as how they you have like 3 sets of sons that have the same exact name, and in order to create confusion, in order to create like it being harder to find people and things.
Gotcha. Well, so it says 28301 Franklin Road is where the Franklin Club Apartments were on, and I kind of triggered in on Southfield, Michigan. So basically, the Franklin Club Apartments were in Southfield, Michigan for about 1 month until November of 4th of 1978. The manager of the complex at the time was Bob Prusak. Prusak said Bush quit in order to pursue a new job at Franklin Terrace Apartments, another assisted living facility located at 26962 Franklin Road, Southfield, Michigan. According to Bush's father, Chris was to start his new job on 11/22/78, the day he was found dead in his parents' home. So extremely interesting that most people don't go and commit suicide after having just gotten a new job. I mean, if you're out there actively looking for something, that means that you're looking to your future. And for him to have gone out and wanted to begin this new job in the very day, that's the day that he takes his life, it just seems awfully weird. But what I did put together with this, because we've been looking for a place to place these particular key rings that we'd found in Jack's belongings. And one of them on one side says GMAC. The other side is a GMAC. So if it's lost, it's supposed to be returned to GMAC PO Box 2000. And I think that says 8. Let me see here. 2036. Southfield, Michigan. So I thought, what would be the chances that this key ring was actually taken from Chris Bush's belongings instead of it being something that Jack actively had for his own use? Again, it was found in the green tackle box that it contained undeveloped film, 110 film, regular film. It had pieces of rope that were cut to about 2 to 3 feet. It had the pilot pen that I believe that was used to execute many of the Zodiac letters, albeit it was bent sideways and looked like somebody had overused it until it completely broke. And that also takes us back to the nuclear power plant picture that was in Jack's belongings that says 5 miles north of Charlevoix on US 31. And I know that Lindsay Mac had brought to the attention that the style of rope that was used in the Chris Bush well, not used, but was in the pictures of the suicide scene of Chris Bush. That particular type of rope was also found in an extra room, I believe, in the Ramsey's home in Charlevoix, Michigan. Correct?
Whoops.
Lindsay?
There you go. Oh, yeah. Sorry, it was muted. Yes, correct. Yep.
So that being another tie back, because we were just talking about the Fox Island and the fact that John Benet Ramsey's grandfather had engineered and built the runway for planes to land on the island. So it just seems to keep nestling itself back into this neat little nifty ball. All right. So that means we're going. Yes. So I'm definitely going to just start bouncing through these. And at any point in time you want to add anything to it, I'm going to, of course, ask you what each one means, but I'm going to try and move through it fairly quickly. So you'd given us some history on John Edward Walsh Jr. It says that National Florida Airlines operating 3 daily nonstop Miami Daytona Beach flights, according to Richard A. Elford, station manager. Richard says National Florida offering free transportation to all certified travel agents. I'm not sure why that's in the middle of, or John Walsh is in the middle of it, but it does allude to he's been named Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing and Partner of Hotel Management Associates Ltd., which managed the 360-room, $26 million Paradise Grand Hotel, scheduled to open early 1982 on Paradise Island. And so we did make that connection. We showed the picture of that hotel. I think that I thought it was named Atlantis when I went, but this was obviously many years after John Walsh had anything to do with it, because this is from 1981, this particular article.
Well, you notice he got out of it really quick, didn't he?
Yeah, well, and purportedly the reason for that was his son coming up abducted, right?
Yeah. Yep, that was his excuse, but I think it was that he was involved in stuff and he didn't want nobody to find.
So originally, John Walsh being from New York, he would ultimately walk away from his lucrative career, and he and his wife would forever be changed by this murder of his son, Adam Walsh. You did link him to Meyer Lansky and Alan Rivenbark. Now, you indicated that both of these, so Lansky is what, mafia, and Rivenbark is cartel?
Yeah, so Rivenbark, I'm pretty sure a lot of the viewers know who he is. He was a big mob boss all over the country for all different, and he was affiliated with many politicians. Gotcha.
So I did kind of put.
And they would catch him in things, and he would never get prosecuted either, because of his power that he had over them.
So it looks like, from what I can tell here, so the Unsolved Murder of Adam Walsh, Book 2, Finding the Victim by Arthur J. Harris, he had written in regards to it, and he had talked about November of 81, 3 months after John Monahan identified Adam's head. He arrived at another morgue in the Rocky Mountains. Grelin reported a private turbojet had crashed carrying 7 bound from Opelika Airport in Dade. All had been killed and body parts were scattered, even in trees. One victim was Monahan's 23 years younger fiance. Another was Alan Rivenbark, who at the time of his death, 6 federal and state law enforcement agencies were investigating for suspected drug smuggling, money laundering, and harboring fugitives. It also says he was suspected of being, Rivenbark owned a secluded mountain ranch 30 miles from Vail, which was suspected of being a hideout for East Coast mobsters, as well as a distribution point for drug trafficking in Colorado. The 7 crash victims were all headed there. And then it says Sarasota, Florida Herald Tribune reports UPI story published November 22nd of 1981. Airplane in Colorado crash was being watched by the DEA. The story said the plane was under surveillance by officers monitoring a cocaine smuggling operation, a federal agent had said. So, I mean, they're following this plane. And if it's known that it's being followed, or that the DEA is looking at them, then they probably, powers above them, probably made sure that none of these people would end up getting busted, so it didn't lead back to them. Which kind of reminds me of you making the comment about John Walsh not wanting the FBI investigate his son's disappearance. And I think that would also have led to connections that he probably didn't want to have, which is kind of solidified by the fact that he dropped the suit against Sears because he didn't want his laundry out there.
Yep.
It says at the crash site
All that
investigator.
cocaine.
Right.
All that cocaine. I'm hearing it big time. Jeez. Okay.
At the crash site, investigators had found 30 handguns, one holstered to a victim's leg, and 50 to 60,000 in cash and fresh snow. He quoted Bill Bachman, the chief investigator in 1981 for the sheriff's office of Eagle County, Colorado, that when Monahan arrived, he had a bodyguard with him that was a gorilla. Monahan claimed and identified 6 of the bodies, and excluding only a man with a Japanese name who was thought to be Rivenbark's bodyguard. He made arrangements for dental records. He kind of took charge of the whole situation. That was kind of unusual, says Bachman. And Bachman added that he, as he investigated the crash, he received death threats by telephone. Very interesting.
We got to remind the audience who Monahan is. Monahan is John Monahan. John Walsh.
Well, I just mentioned that. I just mentioned that at the beginning. John Monahan identified Adam Walsh's head.
Oh, okay.
Right. And no, that's okay. And we did talk about it in the last couple of weeks that he was the boss for Walsh in the hotel industry, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then not only that, it's the fact that Monahan also, being him identifying Adam with dental records, he identified this person in the crash with dental records. So,
and how does he, being a nobody, get his hands on people's private information like that?
Yeah.
Huh.
And how is he authorized to even do
CIA.
Yep.
There you go.
It's got CIA written all over it. Okay.
Yeah, it does. And this also reminded me of another plane crash and another plane that was involved with drug smuggling, and we all know the bald man is involved in that, who was a DEA, but was also working for both sides in Arkansas.
And who's the bald man?
Oh, I can't remember his name.
I'm sorry.
I figured y'all
he's bald.
He worked Bill Clinton in Mena, Arkansas.
He was working for Clinton?
So Clinton was involved in letting it continue to happen because he knew about it the whole time that they were doing this drug smuggling on this airway in Little Mena, Arkansas, and he was later killed by the mob as well later on.
And how did they determine that Clinton was aware of the drug smuggling that was going on?
Because many politicians and many people would try to tell him, and he would dismiss it. Yeah, like it wasn't happening. And he was the governor then of Arkansas.
Yeah, I was going to say governor.
Okay, that makes more sense. He knows what's going on in his state. In a John Walsh interview, he speaks in regards to his best friend, which is Jeff O'Regan, who was his good friend that he knew from college, was working as a lifeguard at the Diplomat and was able to find him a job as a beach boy and lifeguard. So was the Diplomat in Florida?
Yep. So he came. So and both of them, Jeff O'Regan and John Walsh, were from Albany, New York. So. And so that links Jeff O'Regan to John Monahan in some type, shape, or form. So how does he just randomly say, "Oh, let's go down here and I can get you a job," like with such and such, And then all of a sudden, he goes from lifeguard to saving Monahan's son after almost drowning in the ocean, and then Monahan thought he was just a magnificent dude that he just was going to offer him a job as one of the managers.
Right. And I see that in this next article that they're talking about, though I couldn't really make out. It says police said they had checked the background of John Walsh, marketing vice president for a hotel in the Bahamas. So now at this particular point in time, he's actively running the Paradise Hotel and could not find any motives for anyone to want to kidnap Walsh's son. And the next article goes on to talk about Jeff O'Regan, his condition. He's red-eyed. He's assisting in the search command post and taking phone calls in Hollywood Boulevard. And he mentions that it was an extremely sick person to have killed Adam, and that he was one of the nicest little kids you'd ever want to meet. So we now have Jeff O'Regan clearly talking about how close he was to the family. And then there's that Bahamas connection. And let's not forget the paradise that has been used by the Zodiac killer throughout his particular communications.
Yeah.
That brings us to, let's see here, Memory of Sad Yesterday creates good work. I'm trying to figure out, this one is a Good Morning America spot. So we just talked about that. They don't need the FBI. They only need Good Morning America. John Walsh continued on an episode of Good Morning America, pleading for the return of his son after already knowing that his son's beheaded head had been found. That brings us into Joe Varon. Drug cartel defender defends James Campbell, the babysitter. So yep. Joe Varon is a defender of the drug cartel, and James Campbell, the babysitter, who is that?
James Campbell was the one that was living with the Walshes and whom had an affair with Rebay.
Okay, and he's the one that spoke about the cocaine usage.
Yes, and then. So not only that, so whenever police started looking at James Campbell and started interviewing him, I guess John Walsh got kind of scaredish, and so he went ahead and hired a lawyer for James Campbell, in which was Joe Varon. And when I looked up Joe Varon's background as an attorney, he was a very prominent attorney for the drug cartel defending people within the drug cartel of the cocaine smuggling.
Interesting. And I know that there's a parallel here because Dennis had told me that Tim Miller had explained to him that during the time his daughter was taken, that he was also into drugs. And that was one of the things that he was upset with himself, basically, that he was not keeping track of his daughter because he was so invested and busy in things that were nefarious. So he basically regretted it for the rest of his life. President signs advocated bill. What is this about? Oh, the missing kids bill spurred by Adam Walsh.
Yep, that was one of the first bills that he got passed. And then that's when the FBI crime computers come into effect, and that's what was used when that bill was passed.
Well, and I was interested in what it had to say. It says, for the past year, John Walsh has traveled throughout the country urging passage of legislation that would give parents access to the FBI's crime computer as a clearinghouse for information about missing children. So did that ever happen?
Yeah, that's whenever they started. Do y'all remember? I think it was back in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever they were fingerprinting children at all these different shopping malls.
Yeah.
That's who got that. That's what started it. That was the FBI's crime computer clearinghouse. That's what that was for their fingerprints.
And so, of course, Reagan is mentioned in here again, said the Walshes have committed their lives to a cause of missing children and have enlisted thousands of others in seeking better access to police information about those children. So why are we still not getting access to this information? I mean, Kathy Broad had to fight to get her files in the OCC case released on her own brother because nothing had been done for more than 40 years. I mean, at a certain point, it should time out. You've had your opportunity. I get it that you guys would like to be, or law enforcement would like to be the ones to solve these in the future. But sometimes just putting that information out there for everybody to be able to view and research may come to a faster and quicker resolve.
Yeah.
Let's see. Denny Abbott, director of Adam Walsh Child Resource Center, a Broward children's rights group, echoed Reagan's comments. In my mind, there's no question that this law would not have been signed into law without John and Reve. So evidently it was signed in, despite opposition to the bill from Justice Department officials. Again, why? We should be working on this stuff together.
Yep. And
it's so corrupt.
Why does he automatically assume, like, he knows for a fact it's going to be passed, and it would only be done by them?
Well, because your politicians and your mobsters are all working together, and they can move mountains, whereas the rest of us can't. Like I said, if my child or any other person from our level of society had lost their child with no connections, we would just have gone into a depression. We'd been divorced. Yep. We'd have lost everything. We would have mourned our child the proper way, rather than I'm going to be able to build off of this and become something.
I want to mention somebody else who is. Who did the same thing, and it was with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and it was the Jacob Wetterling case with Patty Wetterling. She did the same exact thing, and she was an executive at the National Center for Missing Children, and got the law passed for sex offenders to be the sex offender registry. She got the law passed it started in one state, and then she would advocate every other state until it was every state. I think there's only like maybe two states, if not all of them, that have that registry now in the U.S.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Well, and I guess they've got to leave some states open because, quite frankly, it's awfully hard for these people to find a place to live and to work that isn't centrally located next to a school, which is against their probation or their ability, right? I mean, they have to be X amount of space away from a school or any place that children play, like parks and stuff. I mean, try dodging those particular parameters. That literally is going to put you out in the middle of the woods where your job opportunities are little to none. It's almost as if you're begging these people to become criminals.
Mm-hmm. And then, guess who passed that law? Guess what president it was?
Oh boy. Okay. That makes sense. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. All right, so I'm looking at a picture of Denny Abbott with John Walsh, and he's the one that was running the Adam Walsh Child Resource Center, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And does he have any type of a background that might be interesting to us?
No, that's a good. I need to look into him. His name doesn't come up a lot. It's just in a couple of articles. So he probably wasn't really any. He probably was just some little piece of the puzzle. But
I thought I just landed on a sentence that says he appeared on 60 Minutes to argue the point that a clergyman have a duty to report child abuse to it cut off, so it doesn't really say to who, and he appeared on
one of those people that was paid to do what they wanted to
represent. Gotcha. Well, and clergymen, I mean, obviously, I think that pedophilia rings and abuse of small boys was kind of a huge thing that was in the church at one point in time. It's probably a little more quieter, not as well known. These days, I don't think that it is completely gone from that particular system, but that was kind of a big, huge Catholic thing, wasn't it, Harriet?
Yeah, they just found something to sensationalize. And in my invariable opinion, to create a huge smoke screen where a whole bunch of dirty other stuff was going on. So, that seems to be what our government and what our media seems to do. Hey, let's pick this and make people look all over here and sensationalize it and make them angry while something else is going on.
Yep.
And I admitted that I am pretty conservative, and I'm glad I didn't vote for Reagan. He was my first time to vote, and I didn't vote for him. Okay, he has a lot of great points about him, but Lindsay, if you look at some of my solves, he is invariably the ultimate cocaine cowboy. It was flowing under him.
Oh, I know.
Okay, so Reagan
do Bush a lot of his work.
And that just got us into the midst of Reagan as we're sitting here talking about it, because my next slide talks about continued with Roy Cohn, mob attorney, and Murdoch and Reagan. So evidently Murdoch introduced Roy Cohn to Reagan.
Yep.
And we have pictures
and that's the proof of it right there.
Gotcha. So it says CIA, mafia, drug, and murder ties cover-ups in Australia. This having to do with Rupert Murdoch. We also show JFK and a young Rupert Murdoch. So clearly these people are bouncing around with the politicians.
Yeah, I wanted to, before we get too much ahead, on that one article about the cocaine in the Bahamas. I didn't know if you had read that one, but we can save it for the end.
Which one about the cocaine and some of them I cannot read. Unfortunately, they are so blurry. So I only saw where Jeff O'Regan was listed on the right-hand side. And let's see, police, they said to check the background of John Walsh, a marketing vice president for the hotel, and the rest of it. But he also voiced frustration about a lack of agencies to help for missing children. I do believe that we covered the theory of John Walsh not having wanted to smuggle drugs back and forth from Bahamas as one of the reasonings as to why his child was abducted and killed. But I don't know that we've seen anything other than that theory be stated. And then, of course, they state that they did their investigations. Law enforcement didn't find that John Walsh had any skeletons in his closet. My gosh, you cannot be connected, hooked up, and running around with these people without skeletons in your closet. I just don't feel like you'd be accepted.
So, like, I think you read, like, we had all checked him out. Police questions the Walsh's extensively. Yeah. That one.
Yeah.
At the end,
yeah, we did that.
At the end, I just thought it was funny how they worded this. It says, things would have been easier had Adam been a stolen car. Missing children have no serial numbers to run through a computer.
Oh, dear Lord. Like, that's a thing. Yes, they do. It's called teeth. So Roy Kahn, a little bit about him. It says Kahn was trained as a lawyer, but he was a fixer by trade. I'm not sure what they mean by fixer.
Yeah, he wanted to fix their problems.
Oh, McCarthy hired him as chief counsel to his permanent subcommittee on investigations and made him infamous as a communist hunter. Kahn in turn mentored Stone, who got his start as a Nixon dirty trickster, and later introduced Kahn to Ronald Reagan, whom Kahn introduced to Rupert Murdoch. Huh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Small world.
Very small world. Now, back to Rupert Murdoch and John Walsh. Now that we know he had some sort of mob-like involvement or tendencies, we see some interesting things that they've put out, like Spy Murdoch, Breaking Fox News. Like, what is that supposed to mean?
Yeah. I think that was whenever he gave up Fox and sold it. That was a more recent one.
Oh, gotcha. Well, and then it had wanted Rupert Murdoch for war crimes, tax dodging, political blackmail, and phone hacking. Immediately contact Occupy Rupert Murdoch Week, March 22nd, 29th, 2015, occupythemedia.org.uk. So it looks like in 2015, some people were pretty much trying to out him for some of this stuff. I don't know. Do you know who made up this wanted poster?
It's people from the UK. So it was all coming out like his dirty laundry in the UK, and they were trying to expose it in the US.
Well, and we had mentioned several times that it seemed that the that media and the news and all of these were owned by Jewish families. So here's some of his background. Murdoch's Jewish roots. Murdoch became an American citizen for business reasons. According to Richard A. Curtis, editor of the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, Keith Rupert was born in Melbourne, Australia on March 11th, 1931. Rupert's father, Sir Keith Murdoch, was a newspaper publisher and his mother an Orthodox Jew. Curtis wrote, although Murdoch never offers that information in his biographies. Why would you hide it? I don't understand. You should be proud of where you came from. Clearly, this was not something to be proud of. It says all these same traits are associates as well with none other than John Edward Walsh Jr. himself. So why did Rupert Murdoch choose John? Answer, because based on his associates, he was the perfect candidate to set up a television host because he knew the deals, he knew the people, and he knew the game. Therefore, he could easily cover up any crime and blame it on other scouted so-called criminals to fearmonger the American people and pin murders and crime on innocent people for the sake of their distractions and narratives under none other than Rupert Murdoch, the father of the newspapers and media.
Yep.
I
just got
that kind of.
when you read that.
Did you type that? Was that your?
I did. Yep.
Gotcha.
But I still,
and
when
then
I go back over and I read what I write, I still get whenever I find stuff, I still go back and reread it, and I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, when it hits you. That's for sure. So it says these key individuals are Larry Silverstein and the former Israeli commando Frank Lowy. These leaseholders of dubious repute who gained control of the World Trade Center property 6 weeks before 9/11, and Port Authority Chairman Louis M. Eisenberg, who authorized the transfer of the leases. So it says back to Ruber. Now that we okay, so what is Larry Silverstein and the former Israeli commando Frank Lowy about?
So they were the leaseholders of the World Trade Centers.
Were they the new ones, or were they the ones that sold it?
So they were the leaseholders of the property 6 weeks before 9/11. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I want to say that.
Do you think MK? Say something really quick. Do you think that they were involved? MK Ultra, those two? Because there's definitely an MK Ultra connection to the towers.
Oh yeah, 100%. People were.
Yeah.
tricked.
Because that's what Jack keeps on saying. It's the MK Ultra plan to bring those down. Since 1950s. Anyways, so that's because the names are sounding familiar to me. I do a ton of reading, and I often don't take notes, but that sounds familiar.
And the last name Silverstein is going to be Jewish descent, correct?
Yep.
We talked about Jack Ruby, whose last name was actually Rubenstein. And then Israeli, obviously, Jewish descent. And one of the things that I had heard way back when 9/11 originally occurred was that they had a new owner of building number 7 who had double or triple insured it. Am I correct in that assertion?
Say that again.
That somebody had taken possession and ownership of building number 7, which housed the CIA and the Treasury, which I long since believed that held the key to the $270 trillion Granddaddy Bush had lost of our Social Security funds. And it was housed in the same building as the CIA, which was number 7. So if that's the explanation as to why that building went down when there was absolutely no damage, it wasn't hit by anything, there was no reason for that building to implode other than to just get rid of every last piece of evidence or otherwise that could have been pulled up in regards to those missing funds, always intrigued me.
Yep. And it says here that Silverstein and Lowry took control over the 10.6 million square foot complex, which included the Twin Towers office buildings and 2 9-story office buildings. Silverstein and former Israeli commando Lowry then controlled.
You cut out. We lost her. Let's see if I can pick up where she left off. So 50 days before 9/11, Silverstein Properties and Lowry's Westfield America secured 99-year leases on the World Trade Center. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey turned control of the World Trade Center over to the private hands of Silverstein and Lowy on July 24th of 2001. Silverstein and Lowy then took control of the 10.6 million square foot complex, which included the Twin Towers office buildings and 2 9-story office buildings. Silverstein and the former Israeli commando Lowy then controlled all access to the World Trade Center. Lowy leased the shopping concourse called the Mall at the World Trade Center, which comprised about 427,000 square feet of retail space. 6 weeks before the World Trade Center towers were destroyed, the Port Authority completed the process of leasing them for 99 years to Larry Silverstein and the developer who had built 7 World Trade Center, which mysteriously self-demolished at 5:25 p.m. on 9/11. Your solve actually dictated that particular time, didn't it, Harriet?
Yeah, all the way on down to the seconds.
Right.
So remember,
so
I didn't really believe for the longest time that they could have been demolished a certain way until I kept on seeing more than once that there were timers put in there, and they did it. And so it was years in advance. So
it says, let me finish this out real quick. It says simultaneously, the retail space underneath the complex was leased to Westfield America, the U.S. division of an Australian company that is one of the world's largest operators of shopping malls. Paul Goldberger wrote in the New Yorker May 20th of 2002. While Murdoch may have tried to hide his Jewish roots, he has been quite forthright about his support for extreme right-wing Zionists such as Benjamin Netanyahu and Ariel Sharon. Netanyahu wrote the book entitled The War on Terror, How the West Can Win in 1986, is a frequent commentator on Murdoch's Fox News. Murdoch's report for Zionism extremists is well known and a matter of record. As New York Governor George Pataki said, there is no newspaper in the U.S. more supportive of Israel than the Murdoch's New York Post. It is through a network of Zionist organizations in which Murdoch plays a central role that Murdoch is connected to the individuals who arranged the privatization and obtained control of the World Trade Center shortly before its destruction. Wow.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
I got him.
Boom. So tracking systems with Murdoch and Walsh online with the help of Hank Asher. We talked about him. You stated he was another drug mob man.
Yep. So he had I'm trying to find my slip.
Well, it says here the New York Times magazine posted an article that says the man who trapped us in U.S. databases.
Yep, there it is.
Hank Asher was a drug smuggler with a head for numbers until he figured out how to turn Americans' private information into a big business.
Yep.
Just scary.
That sums it up right there.
Yeah, it does. And I thought that was a nice little, but he also went on to be part of the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. That had a lot to do with putting the kids' pictures on the back of milk cartons. Correct, Harriet?
And online.
Oh,
right
yeah.
And
Yeah.
how they're online
Oh,
right
my
now
God.
on the internet.
So the new crime
I got
wave,
bad
panic,
things to say about that.
and we'll get to that
Yeah,
for sure. So
Yeah.
no, why don't you go ahead and fill us in on that? We've got a few minutes left here, and we're coming close to the end. Or let me finish this stuff off real quick, and then we'll let you speak on missing children, Harriet. Hold on. So the new crime wave panic and the long shadow of the long shadow of John Walsh. We are still living in the world that Walsh and America's Most Wanted helped build, a paranoid populace that believes crime is everywhere and can only be solved through relentless policing.
Yep.
Goes on to say the paper sues police. So now, in order to even come up with Adam Walsh's police files and the investigations that were done in this particular case, it took a paper to sue. It says a newspaper in Mobile, Alabama is suing the Hollywood Police Department to release the files on the unsolved murder of Adam Walsh, the little boy who was abducted from a Sears department store and murdered 14 years ago. So this is in 1995 when this is written. The Mobile Press Register filed suit in Broward Circuit Court last Friday after twice being denied access to the records, which the police department contends are exempt from public scrutiny because the case is ongoing. Adam Walsh 6 was abducted from the Sears on July 27th, 1981, when his mother wasn't looking. 2 weeks later, on August 10th, 1981. Adam's severed head was found by two fishermen in a canal 120 miles away near Vero Beach. No one has ever been charged in the case. Let's see if I can figure out what else. Hoffman and Hickman asked Toole for details. He answered in generalities. Okay, so here's a little bit of information on the information being fed to Toole in order to claim to be the patsy for this particular crime. It says that when Hoffman and Hickman, the detectives on the case, asked Toole for details, he answered in generalities or cliches. And when he did come close to dealing in specifics, he hedged and he got an awful lot of things completely wrong. For example, they asked him if he remembered in what month the murder occurred. I ain't really sure on the month, Toole told him. I always get jawed up on months all the time. Goaded into offering up an answer, he said January. That was in keeping with another of his responses that Adam was wearing long pants and mittens. More than 2 years later, on October 10th of 1983, NBC aired a made-for-TV movie about the case, and the Walshes struggled to raise public awareness about the plight of missing children. Earlier that same day, Duval County Jail inmate Otis Toole, then age 36 and serving a sentence of life imprisonment, mentioned to Brevard County detectives something about a child murder he committed in Broward. That admission turned into a full-scale confession given to Hollywood police, who announced on Friday, October 23rd, that the case was solved and Toole would be indicted. But we know where that went from here. It clearly was found out that he was being fed information by law enforcement. It says Hoffman pulled out Adam's famous missing picture, the one that which he stands smiling and holding a baseball bat, and asked Toole if he recognized it. And Toole said, "I don't think so." Toole answered, "No, I don't think that's the kid, though." So he doesn't even recognize the person he killed. Captain Steve Davis, the then commander of the Hollywood Detective Division, wrote, "At this point in the investigation, it has been determined that maybe he did and maybe he didn't kill Adam." You guys, that's a hilarious statement, since when I provided all of the handwriting of Jack to the FBI, that's what their report came back and said. Not only was it literally a whole paragraph, but it said he may have written it and he may not have.
Oh my God, I'm having deja vu. Oh my God.
Right? When
What
the
in
case
world?
when the case eventually was heard in court, John Walsh protested bitterly against the opening of the police files, which seemed ironic given the fact that week after week, Walsh's TV show asks the public for help in finding dangerous fugitives from justice. So there's your irony. He doesn't even want the case reopened. In February of 1996, Broward Circuit Judge Leroy H. Moe ordered Hollywood police to open the Adam Walsh files to the press and the public. So what did that take? Something like 11 years in a court suit in order for that newspaper to get these files released. That brings us to kind of a spot here. I think that you had some notes showing that it leads to Nixon, to Bush, to John Walsh, the unconstitutional lies, secrecy, spying, spies. Like, you have all these notes that are taken down on this journal, and I'm not really quite sure what to make of it because they kind of bounce back and forth, but I do kind of get what you're saying here as far as the connections are concerned, and you've labeled it the program.
Mm-hmm.
And then last but not least is this chart that you sent me, which I'm not sure, it's Dorian philosophy.
So it was just like a good chart that would kind of like how it would connect everything together in the little spider web.
And so this is basically what you're saying is a pedophilia ring of individuals, newspapers, magazines, politicians, pretty much you name it. It shows all different types of avenues. And did that also include the Center for Missing Children?
Yep. Because these pedophiles working are included in these families who have lost children, like Patty Wetterling.
So maybe that one might take a little more going over. I wish it was a little more legible.
Yeah.
All right. So Harriet, go ahead and tell us about Missing Children Network.
Oh, okay. I was having people ask me, can I look into Johnny Gosh? Because I was doing something with the Sentinel Star and finding out some amazing information just by anagramming and having the messages surface that he's saying that Adam Walsh did live on, became Lily Brandt. But then I was also doing the 1980s version, like an updated version of the Donna Lass postcard and the letters, and put that all together. And to my surprise, it brought up about Eaton Potts and Johnny Gosh, that Johnny Gosh lived on, that Eaton Potts was unfortunately taken because somebody who I think took pictures of him connected to the father owed millions in cocaine that had gotten picked up by the DEA. So they were getting even. Very sad. But the thing is, I didn't want to go into the two-sounding extreme of believing Johnny Gosh lived on. That would be conspiracy theory stuff. But you can read on, and I think Lynn's mess, she'll say it too. Johnny Gosh's mother said she believed he lived on, that there was a call, and that's why the book, why Johnny can't come home, blah, blah, blah.
Well, his own mother claims that he came to the house one night and visited him like at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Wow. So and what age was he supposedly abducted?
11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2013?
No, he was abducted
around
in
12 or 13.
Was it 80?
Yeah.
In the 80s.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we are down literally to our last 40 seconds here. We can pick up maybe with this particular diagram and more information in regards. We're not to 1986 yet, but if you remind me, we'll catch up with that in the time frame so we can chronologically move on at this point. But I want to thank both Lindsay Mac for all of your work, all of the connections that you've put together, for being on the show for the last couple weeks as well, and Harriet for all your knowledge and background in this stuff.
Oh yeah,
you guys rock.
I definitely love her being there just in case I'm like, what? Who is that again, Harriet? You know who I'm talking about. So she's great.
She's like a storage, a storage closet of names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, you guys have a wonderful weekend. Take care, everybody out there. Enjoy your week, and we will see you next Friday.
See ya.
Oh,